Hello, everyone. This is Preston Glass, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show. All right.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
So, this show takes us to some very, very interesting places and allows us to have some conversations with some fascinating people that we've always wanted to meet. And one of the things that happened very recently was after Maurice White passed, we became very, very sensitive to the shows that we had captured. We captured a show with Felton Pilot that we absolutely treasure. And then we also captured a show with Mick Gillette. And he had recently passed too. And he had such a good time that we said, we'd love to have you back. And he said, I got so many stories, we could do this once a month. And we said, let's go. And then before
life happens,
knew it, 2 or 3 months had passed. We didn't capture those 2 or 3 months, and then he passed away. But it really created a sense of urgency for us that, the show gives us a great excuse to capture stories that deserve to be preserved for posterity.
Yeah, I heard an African proverb one time that said, when a man dies, a library burns. So,
sure.
It's good to catch all them historical things that are in that library that is, part of a man's experience before it burns, yeah.
The other thing that we realize is that there's this matrix that we all kind of live in, and we all work together. We have Jeff Traeger on the show. I don't know if you know who Jeff Traeger is, but he would go around and he worked on the payola end of getting music acts out.
That's not fair to say. He'd never worked payola. He was an honest promoter.
Well,
but he was a promoter who had to deal with the. He wasn't the independent. It was the independent guys who walked in with the briefcases.
Right.
But he worked for Polydor and A&M before that. So he kind of had to deal with those guys, but had. I'm sorry, I had to do that.
No, but he has this amazing catalog of stories. He helped break Ike and Tina Turner in the Bay Area. Got him to cross over onto the regular instead of being on a black station, they were on the station
on KFRC.
Yeah. Right?
I remember that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about late '60s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's neat to be able to link all you guys together in your lives and stories, and we get the benefit of that because we get to link everybody together.
I'd like to hear. I'm glad I'm connecting with you guys. I want to hear some stories.
There's some great.
I know a lot of both record execs, promotion guys that were in house, and then them independent guys. I've been visit with them too, and it's good to see both sides of the story.
It's funny about Jeff when we sat him down. We said, "Tell us about the big guys." We had the kind of idea of where the show was going to go, and he starts telling us about his life with Wilt Chamberlain. And we're like,
a big guy.
Okay,
big guy.
Yeah, he did, and he went on for about 15 minutes, and we were fascinated. And then I went, "That's not the big guy I was talking about." Yeah. But I'm glad we got those 15 minutes. Wow. It was a good story, but that is one of the things is that we're sort of assembling a tapestry, not necessarily on purpose.
Yeah,
but we reached out to Felton. I grew up in Vallejo. So I grew up with Confunction hanging over me musically, and when I was a kid, everybody in Vallejo knew Felton. He drove a Cadillac Alante, and so anytime he went by, hey, there's Felton, and
that's Vallejo, a small community.
It is a small community, and he was the baddest musician. So everybody, followed him around, and when we got him on the show, he was terrific. After we got him on the show, though, we had a series of other musicians who all said, we'd go, all right, well, let's start at the beginning. And they'd start at the beginning, and eventually, not too long after the beginning, they'd say, and then I met Felton Pilot. And then we went, we didn't even put that together. So I suspect that what's going to happen...
you're going to make a movie called Following Felton.
Here are all the people who know Felton. Yeah.
7 degrees.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I think that what's going to happen is the same thing that happened with Felton, is that we're going to go through and reach out to all the people we find interesting, and they're going to say things like, well, and then I did this record with Preston Glass. So as an introduction for our listeners who typically, when people listen to our show, they go, oh, that person. And I bet a chunk of our listeners already know who you are. The chunk who don't know who you are, though, we find they'll go and look. Well, I better go see who this person is, and they'll look you up. What they'll find when they look you up, if you guys haven't looked them up already, is that you've had a long career that's involved some terrific people that are in the musical soundscape of our lives. People like Aretha Franklin, Natalie Cole, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I'm leaving out 1,000 people. George Benson, Kenny G, and along the way, I would say you were probably our generation's. I don't want to pigeonhole you because you got a lot of songs and in a wide variety of, you got a lot of great up-tempo songs. But to me, you are probably the master of the lush ballad. And I think that, in my imagination, is where your sweet spot is. Do you refute that comment? Or
that's a compliment,
like?
it is a compliment, and I thank you. But, I love all kinds of music. And sometimes you don't know what's going to be the thing that people know you for. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first album that I ever produced by myself, I did some co-productions, and before that was known as a songwriter, but it was the Kenny G Duotones album, which it wasn't Kenny's first album, it was his fourth.
Right.
And he was about to get dropped by Clive and Arista because they were revamping their roster. They were getting rid of all their jazz artists, and they gave Kenny one more, kind of like the last album. Yeah. And I had just happened to have known Kenny from Seattle when I worked up there with Thom Bell. So when he was with the Jeff Lorber group, and, so actually they asked Narada, Michael Walden, to produce the album. Narada was, of course, at that time was my boss. Really, I was working under Narada. He was producing Aretha Franklin, and I was writing and arranging for that. He was producing Whitney Houston, I was writing and arranging for that. So when they asked Narada said, I don't have time for this unknown sax player, whoever it is.
I don't know who this guy is.
Kenny Garlic, what's his name? Yeah. So then they said, actually I'll be specific about who said it, Ed Eckstein, who was Billy Eckstein's son.
Okay.
Who had just come from working with Quincy Jones's Quest Records over to Arista. And he said, what about that guy Preston Glass? Maybe, our budget is probably too small for you anyway, Narada. I know he does a lot of work for you. Would he be interested? And I heard he knows Kenny. Of course, I was interested. I was like, oh, yeah, I want to produce. So, long story short, it was a little left of center from my R&B, stone cold soul music thing, being working with a jazz, kind of pop jazz, and what they now call smooth jazz,
right?
Because of that album.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what was going to happen. But
sure.
So now
just making music.
Yeah, just making music and trying. I think I won't say by accident, but by just doing what I felt was the right thing as a producer. I started off producing by trying to bring the best out of an artist, not by like, this is my sound. And I'm going to enforce my sound on you. I said to Kenny G, what do you want to do? And we sat down together. He said, well, I want to be known as a sax player, not just a guy who plays solos and he has guest vocalists. Mm-hmm. I know the label wants me to do that, but I'm not going to do that. And me being a new producer, I had to kind of listen to what, I couldn't just say, no, you're going to do. So we made an album that we both felt great about, and I think that's why it took off.
Yeah. Wow. That Duotones album in the early 90s, I was a DJ, and that Duotones album got me through a lot of dinner sets. And it was always the album that set up the thing about that one specifically, because I would play it and intersperse it with a number of other things, but that would be like the foundation of the dinner set because it fit so many settings. You could have the meal in a garden wedding in Napa, and that record would provide a great musical backdrop. Or you could do, an evening wedding in a very intimate setting by candlelight. It didn't matter. And that record, really did launch smooth jazz.
It did.
Yeah, so, it's one of those things nowadays. Smooth jazz is kind of being phased out a little bit, but it had a long run, and people either loved it or hated it.
Right.
So I had to be careful about who I tell.
Yeah.
You did that, I'm going to get, or, oh, I love that. You just saw it.
Yeah.
Have to be careful. But like you mentioned earlier, but then when I worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire, which came as it was a surprise to me that Maurice White and those guys were reaching out to me, sort of an unknown. I did Kitty and a couple little other things, but totally not their style. Like, what do you want? I kind of was like, oh, you got the wrong guy, or what? You? And Maurice said flat out, we need some new blood.
Yeah, they want to change styles.
Yeah, and I said, really? And he said, to be honest with you, I didn't listen to a lot of what you did. I kept hearing your name, and I kept hearing about you. So, what
in the right circles.
Yeah, and he said, what's going to really clinch it for me is when you press play on what you prepared for us right now. So I was like, oh no. So I hit the little thing of some music that I prepared for him, and then him and Philip looked at each other and said, this is going to be great. And but that was all kind of funky stuff. So I mean, I wouldn't call that lush ballads what I ended up doing with them, but I wanted to do once again music that brought the best out of them, not enforce my sound, but do what, and not necessarily on what they did back then, because they flat out said, we want to progress, we don't want to. So what I tell young producers too these days, I tell them study, but don't get too locked in on what that artist has done in the past, because they might be coming to you for a total different thing.
Right.
So communicate with them, the artist, about what they want to, sit down with them. What do you want to achieve on this album? I just finished working with Little Anthony from Little Anthony and the Imperials, who's 75 years old.
Yeah.
I should say years young, because he's got a lot of energy, still doing it, sounds exactly the same, and if he sings Going Out of My Head to you, it would sound better, because when he did the record, it was, as he tells me, he said, I had 3 days to learn the song, and I just went in and did it.
Right.
Really third, fourth time I ever sang it. He said, now I've sang that song about 200,000 times.
Back then, he had just memorized it, and by now he's internalized.
He's got that thing down, and it sounds phenomenal. It sounds better than the record.
Wow.
So I sat down with him, and he said, well, now this is going to be my first solo album without the Imperials. So we're not doing the doo-wop thing. I want to try some things that showcase my voice, maybe a duet or here and then.
This is a 75-year-old guy wanting to showcase his voice. That wasn't possible.
Do something new.
Yeah, that wasn't possible 30 years ago. Like, those guys just didn't age well. They're smoking.
You're right. That's true. See, he never. I mean, I didn't know him back then as far as his personal life, but I do know by hanging with him, he's very health conscious.
Right.
He thinks young. He doesn't want to rest on his laurels. And when I said, you want to do a duet, I said, who? Tell me what. He said, I don't want to do a ballad. I want to do something funky.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, really? I started throwing out names, and we were, when you think duet with a male, you're thinking, well, maybe a female. But then I said, since I was sensing he wanted to do something outside the box, I said, what about doing something with a male vocalist that's also an instrumentalist, like a George Benson? He said, wow, we get the right song. So I called George. I've worked with George before. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what he was going to say, but it turned out, and he's early 70s too.
Yeah.
He said, Little Anthony, oh my God, I would love to work with him. There are not too many people around anymore but I would work for him. I'd do that for free. Don't tell anybody. He said, so,
would have.
Yeah. But I did tell Little Anthony that, because he was worried that George probably wouldn't want. But when I told him how excited George, so there were like 2 kids in a candy store.
That's funny to hear that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we hear over and over again from the folks that we have been fortunate enough to, seek out and land, is that approach to music that involves, the humility that you described, and the enthusiasm, because the folks we like, and I guess it comes through, because we like these folks for probably the same reason, is that they're making music that they're really enthused about. And then when you get the opportunity to work with somebody, you go, yeah, I've always wanted to work with that person. Who wouldn't want to work with Little Anthony? It's funny to hear that he would think for a minute that George Benson wouldn't react that way.
Boy, it was such an interesting session. They loved the song and everything. That was one thing. And then we had to get the record company to agree to the term. So then comes the session, and we're talking about not only George singing but playing guitar. And I thought, how are we going to do? Okay, should we do separate vocals? Or
did you do that here?
We did this at a studio, in Los Angeles, but not at this.
Okay,
house. I did the tracks in this room, and then we did the vocals and the guitar at a place called Private Island Audio in Los Angeles. And so I just said, would you guys mind if you actually sang together? And part of the reason that we did it like that is because they were shooting a video portrait of the making of that. So we did that, but I think that's what helped the song to become that fiery. Because and I personally thought, okay, George can produce his own stuff. He's that much of a great musician. Though Anthony, a great singer, but he's never really written or produced. So this song I wrote with Little Anthony and George. It was the first time
true collaborative effort.
Yeah. And the funny thing is when Little Anthony got in there, he kind of intimidated George. Because when they were going back for, George was just being consummate professional, and Little Anthony was so hyped that he was singing so great. George was like, "Oh shoot, I better sit down. I better get on my
get to it."
Yeah. And it was great. It was like, okay, they rose to the occasion. So
that's incredible to have two beyond seasoned. I mean, these guys are absolute pros, and to have them both be able to get excited at this point in their lives and their careers that's got to be special to watch those guys share.
It was experience for me to just learn. Okay, get out of the way. But then also they were looking to me almost like kids. Like, was that okay?
Yeah.
Did I keep up with George? George, I got to do my part again, Little Anthony. So, it was so funny too. And so, by the
kids
end
with 55 years in the music business.
Isn't that something?
By the way,
like when I was born, they were already well known.
Established.
And so they finished the vocal, and I was like, okay, we got to get George's guitar on because that's part of the sound. And it was approaching dinner time, and having worked with George before, I know that when he goes to dinner, he likes to have a little bit of wine, and if he drinks too much, he doesn't get drunk. He just gets tired,
right?
And he falls asleep.
And then you're done till tomorrow.
You're done. So I said, okay. George was like calling the restaurant already. I'm like, okay, George, can we get the guitar part on before we leave? Oh no, that'll only take me about 15 minutes. We can do that when we get back. I'm like, George, since it only is going to take 15 minutes, why don't we do it now?
Right.
He said the restaurant's going to close. We got to get over. He was so worried about the restaurant. So maybe if it was a new artist or a young kid, I'd be like, you got to do this part. But George wants to go to the restaurant. So we went to the restaurant. Sure enough, everybody's chilling and having fun. And he's having a little bit of that. And so we get back to the studio maybe about 2.5, 3 hours later, and he's chilling in the chair. The vocal was great. He got his guitar, okay, and we put the mic up to him to do the scatting. I want him to do that with the. I knew that we could do it in 5 minutes, but here's the funny thing, man. So, okay, roll it. He's playing with his eyes closed, almost in his sleep, but playing great. But nothing's coming out of his mouth. I'm like, the mic's right there. I'm like, okay, that was a good take, George, but now on this one, can you scat a little bit? I wasn't doing it.
No, his fingers were moving, but his face wasn't.
I said, you want me? I said, yeah, your sound. Everybody's like, yeah. Okay, so roll it again. Okay. That's great, George. We got it. You liked it? Yeah. Okay. We didn't get no scatting on it.
Yeah. Wow.
But he was like, "What do you do?" And the record company guy was there too. He was like, "Man, why you shouldn't have went to the."
That guy wanted to get that beat because in his mind, that's the George Benson being George Benson.
Here's what's funny: we ended up getting it anyway because. What happens? George went back to Arizona, where he lives. Little Anthony went back to Vegas. Everybody liked it when I did the little rough mix, and then George was like, "Preston, I got to do my parts over." What do you mean, the guitar parts? No, I got to do everything. I go, why? Because Little Anthony is smoking on there, and I'm not keeping up.
Man,
he said, I was a little hoarse, and I'm like, George, I know you weren't at your best, but you still, he said, see,
You're
I got to be
George
my
Benson.
best. Yeah, he wasn't going for that.
But that's why George Benson is George Benson, right?
Right.
Preston, I got to do my parts again because that was not my best.
So, here I got, of course you got two legends, and then you got a record company who's paying for it.
Right.
Okay, so I said to George, I already knew the record company's not going to go, because it was a time thing too. So I said, George, well, if you want to do it over, we'd have to do it this weekend because they would need it at a certain time, and plus, I don't think they're going to pay for it either. He goes, okay, here's the thing. I'll pay for it because it's my bad, and I'll come out to L.A., but I'd have to do it next week. I go, they're not going to go for it. I can tell you that right now. It has to be this week. He goes, well, I can't leave Arizona. I have a gig. Something he had to do in Arizona. He said, guess what? I'll do it at a studio out here, and you just check it. I said, yeah, I don't have to check in. Just send me all your parts, and I'm sure we'll. So it turned out he was able to get the scatting done and everything. Excuse me. And it worked out good.
Wow. So Pete says, isn't it funny that these guys get together and they're in their 70s, they're 50-year veterans in music, and they're getting excited. But I almost think that at this point in George Benson's illustrious career, who's going to get him excited? There's got to be somebody like Little Anthony, right? So
Got to be, yeah.
your job as producer, you said, is to get out of the way. So what are you thinking, and is it just an inherent skill that you've gained with experience? Because I know sometimes you got to go in there and poke the beehive, and then you got to stand back.
That's a good. I have to remember that. That's kind of what it's really about. And I guess when you do that, the bees know something's going on, but they don't really know what had just happened. And that's what you kind of want to do with experienced people. You don't want it to be like, this is the way it's got to be. You want it to almost in a roundabout way, where they don't know that they're being prodded. Mm-hmm. Like putting them together, I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen, that it was going to make them rise.
Right.
And it was going to help them. Like, they didn't really know the song as well as maybe if they had rehearsed it more. But by doing it together, they were changing a little bit of the melody here, and then, and it came out.
And each
better.
pushed the other.
Yeah.
And
me just letting them do that, as opposed to, no, you start here, and then just these guys know what they're doing. But then you don't stay back too far to where they're like, well, what's that guy doing? He ain't doing it.
Right, yeah. Why
do something?
Him? Yeah. But I thought that when you were talking about Kenny G and sitting down with Kenny G and saying, what do you want to do? Because maybe we're betraying your contribution a little bit if we think that you sat down with Kenny G and said, what do you want to do? And that was that. At the time, like you said, there's a record company expectation that, listen, this is the formula. You're a soloist. You're going to play some solos. Hopefully you get one that's got a melody that catches on. But in the meantime, we're going to bring this guy in, and we're going to bring in Brian McKnight, and we're going to bring in Al Jarreau, and you're going to have 6, songs with a vocalist. And to me, I think that's one of the things that made that record in particular, and Kenny G also. I always liked Dave Sanborn more than I liked Kenny G as a sax player.
Yeah, me too.
But I think that was the emergence right there, was the difference. So how much of that was Kenny G saying, listen, Preston, here's what I want to do? And how much of it was you saying, go ahead and tell me what you want to do? And I'm also going to sort of nudge you in this direction.
Well, I think by telling him, don't worry about it. Your last 3 albums, he said, I didn't like, because here's kind of how this conversation started. I said, how's your relationship with Clive Davis?
Uh-huh.
He said, Clive doesn't even know who I am. He says, he thinks I'm a black R&B singer.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He goes, because I had a little minor hit on the last album, Hi, How You Doing? Which
How You Doing? By Kenny G.
By Kenny G.
Like
but it was a guy named Barry Johnson who sang, and Kenny had a little 8-bar, 16-bar solo.
Uh-huh.
So Clive was familiar with that, but I said, really? Yeah. He goes, no, he knew me as a side guy for Jeff Lorber. Now, if you read Clive's autobiography, he'll tell a different story.
Right.
But anyway.
He'll tell you about the foresight that it took to get Kenny G.
Yes, exactly. But, I said, really? He goes, so for that reason, I want to make sure on this album, since, he was aware he was going to be dropped by the label. He said, I want to at least have one album where I'm proud that I'm doing what I want to do.
I'm swinging for the fence on this one.
Yeah. He said, quite frankly, the label, and I don't mean Clive, he was talking about Ed Eckstein, and there was another exec there, that they want maybe 8 vocal, instrumental, and maybe 4 or 2 only instrumentals.
Right.
And
those don't tend to be the single.
Yeah, and he said, I want the opposite. I want 8 instrumentals, maybe a couple vocals. I said, okay. So I've got, again, record company's the one paying for that. And this is at a time where I'm even less influential. You know, Narada's kind of watching over the situation.
You're thankful to have the gig.
Yeah, he's Narada's executive producer, right?
Right, so you got to not let Narada down.
Right, which, well, to be honest with you, Narada was like, Preston, you're going to have to do this whole thing. I ain't even pay much attention. I'll check the mixes.
Yeah. Here are the keys.
And back then, you know, we did the mixes on a little DAT tape, and then I would give... I had to do that album from midnight to 8 a.m.
Okay.
Go to sleep for a couple hours.
Where did you do it?
At Narada's studio in San Rafael, Tarpown.
Yeah.
And so I was still working with Narada.
Okay.
So in the daytime, you know, arranging, writing, producer, whatever we do with Whitney and Aretha, and then have dinner, maybe get an hour nap, then come in midnight to 8 a.m. with Kenny. But I was so pumped, I wanted to produce this album, so I didn't get much sleep, but I would set the mixes on top of the refrigerator in the lobby so Narada could hear it. Then by the time, this was the plan. He was supposed to come in, make a little note, change this, change that, or it's cool, and then I'd be, okay. I noticed.
You mixed the record too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Me and Gordon Lyons, who was the B team. We were the B team.
Okay.
You know, Narada and Dave Frazier was the A team. And so, anyway, long story short, he never checked any of the mixes because I could see the cassette hadn't been moved or touched. I even put it. Okay, I'm gonna put it right. Yeah, he didn't touch it. Narada, did you hear the mixes? Yeah, man, great. So anyway, he got executive producer, but I also had the record label saying, you know, even though I knew they weren't paying much attention, they're ready to get rid of them. They're like, you know, we don't want a bunch of little instrumentals here. We want some. You know, we don't have a budget to get a bunch of names. Mm-hmm. Maybe one name and the rest, you know, get some singers on it. So we're like, oh, man. So my job, you know, I had them pushing me this way, him pushing me that way.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And
you had to straddle the line.
Yeah. So I kind of went in the middle. I made sure that the the vocal tunes that we chose had really strong sax presence.
Yeah.
In fact,
and
that's why
really truly showcased Kenny.
We did a remake of "What Does It Take to Win Your Love," the Junior Walker song.
Right.
And this is a funny story because Kenny and I talked about it. Well, whatever vocal tunes we do, if we're writing it, we'll make sure that the sax is a big part of the melody, maybe even the hook, and whatever remakes too. I said, why don't we do "What Does It Take to Win Your Love," because that was right. I mean, that was like the hook.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though it was a vocal
and
song.
the vocal wasn't even a part of that.
Exactly. And he goes,
"That's a great choice." Man, I've always loved that song.
He goes, "I don't know if I know that song." And I go, "Junior Walker." He goes,
"You know that song."
Who's Junior Walker?
Yeah.
He didn't know who Junior Walker was. Here's a sax player.
Right.
I went, "You don't know who Junior Walker is?" I go, "You know, Shotgun." He goes, "Oh, I know that song."
Right.
I go, "That's Junior Walker." He goes, "Oh, I never knew the guy's name." So I brought in the Junior Walker Greatest Hits CD the next day and played. I thought, you probably heard it, you just don't know it. And I played it. He's go, "I never heard this song." He said, "But I like it."
Yeah.
I like the idea.
Sure he liked it.
So it was a new song to him.
Yeah.
What Does It Take to Win Your Love?
That's terrific.
Was new to him.
And so, do you think that played into the freshness of the song for him?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's funny how things happen. And it was like a brand new song to him. And then the way we arranged the track gave it a freshness too. So.
I have to go back and listen to that again now because it's been probably 15 years since I've even heard it.
In fact, that song
with that perspective,
when the album was first released, that was the first cut on the first side. That was the first single, and there were executives at Aretha really wasn't paying attention to the album that much, but that song, before we even recorded, I told Ed Eckstein what we were going to do. He goes, "Great, I think it's a great idea. I have a vocalist that you could use. His name is Ellis Hall."
If you like the show,
and you know you do, support the show.
There are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics and helps us get better placement. Number 2,
visit our website,
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon, and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Ellis, but Ellis, blind keyboard player, but phenomenal vocalist. He's like, he was like a friend of Ray Charles, because he would do a lot of gigs with Ray off and stuff. So they had.
He could
Ellis
actually have been Ray's B team. Like,
yeah,
Ray couldn't make
exactly.
it. Hey, I'm going to send you guys
He
Ellis.
does
so
a
you're
great
gonna love
Ray,
it.
but he can play guitar. He can play every
Wow.
instrument. And so Ellis sang the vocal on that, and did a fantastic job. But then the single came out and flopped. I think because the record company was like, okay, let's just put it out because we have to, and then kick them off and then go on to the next thing. And it was to Kenny's credit, because the second single was "Don't Make Me Wait for Love" with Lenny Williams, which originally came out and flopped.
Right.
So the label's like, okay, have a nice day. And Kenny
Little
said,
sidebar, we're working our way to Lenny Williams, by the way. So Lenny, if you hear this, we want you.
okay, I can hook you up with Lenny.
All right.
I'll give you his number. So Kenny, to his credit, said, I'm going to make a video of this song, and I'm going to put aside a little personal money to promote it if you guys would just give me one more chance to put out Songbird. They said, Songbird? That instrumental? Whatever, go ahead.
Man, this
And
is
then
such
it
a good story.
exploded.
Yeah.
And then they re-released "Don't Make Me Wait for Love." Exploded.
Oh yeah.
And then then the album just went crazy.
Then they saw the money. Then,
And then
This
Clive
is
was like,
truly-
"Yes, my boy."
That's right. I've known it all along. This is truly the story of, okay, kid, this is your last at bat. You're coming out at the end of this inning. Just get up there and get on base. We don't do anything fancy. Just get on base.
Yeah.
He's getting in there going, I'm going to change the tone of this game. I'm going to swing for the fence right now.
I think it's
that's
like
what he did.
I think it's like the basketball thing where you got the kid come down, and he's not the main star, and he's like, I'm going to pull up and shoot this three.
Right.
Like, no, yes!
Yeah. Yes, I'm the one that told him. Go
that was
for
a
it.
cold
Yeah.
play. I drew it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Now here's what's funny though is because Clive wasn't paying attention. He was paying attention to the Narada, Whitney stuff. He kind of mentions that in the book too.
Yeah,
and
I mean that's
Aretha.
what was needed attention right there.
Yeah, but of course when that album, he said that was like a. In fact, that album probably made more profit for them than maybe the Whitney stuff because they were spending a lot.
Right.
They didn't spend. The budget was so low. That's why I got the gig.
Right.
But then the follow-up album,
oh boy,
because it was Kenny's idea to put out that thing, Kenny convinced the label to produce it himself.
Okay.
Usually they come back to the guy. Oh yeah,
sure. You had the formula. Let's go.
Kenny started producing what was now the Silhouette album,
right?
And he turned
Come
it
on,
in.
Kenny.
And Clive, and then we're like, it's all ballads. It was like all ballads,
right?
And Clive made him work with me on 4 cuts.
Okay.
Which 2 made the album, 1 made a flip side.
There's the brilliant foresight of Clive Davis.
So, that's how.
It's interesting because that album doesn't get made the way it needed to get made, unless you have Clive distracted by the things that needed his attention.
Right.
You
That's
know,
a good
where
point,
they can give you that, and then Narada
the freedom.
being
It was really a free. There's a producer. You probably heard of Walter Afanasieff or Walter A. As they call him. Walter was introduced to the world on that album. Walter was a Bay Area musician with a group called the Warriors that played fusion jazz. He also would play with John LaPonte, and for years he was trying to get with Narada. Narada's main keyboard player was Frank Martin. He would use David Sanchez from New York also, but and then of course,
let's put that aside for a second.
That's a whole
just a second, yeah.
And then of course I would play keyboards too. So he wasn't looking for another keyboard player, but I started writing on the side with Walter, and he reminded me of like a David Foster kind of cat. I was like, man, this guy's a good writer, and we started writing some things. But then I had the opportunity. Well, first of all, he was trying to get with Narada. Narada was like, no, that guy can't write pop stuff. He writes jazzy fusion stuff. He's not for art. So because I had the control of this album, I was able to write. And 2 of the main cuts on that Duotones album was written with Walter. Don't Make Me Wait for Love and You Make Me Believe. And once, long story short, that album was so big, I got a lot of gigs off of it. So much so that Narada pretty much said, "Okay, get on out of here. You don't have time for me,
Yeah, it's time
anymore."
He's putting you out of the nest.
Guess who he hired to kind of take my place there? Walter Afanasieff.
Uh-huh.
And Walter ended up doing Mariah
He
Carey
can't write
stuff.
pop tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he played all the keyboards for Vision of Love and I Don't Want to Cry, to where Tommy Mottola said,
Yeah.
I'm going to get... Tommy Mottola hired Walter.
Sure he
Took him away from Narada, really.
Yeah.
Gave him $1 million.
Sure.
And then Love Takes Time was the first production for Walter by Mariah. And then he ended up doing Beauty and the Beast for Celine Dion and Michael Bolton.
Jeez.
But I'm kind of the guy that introduced Walter to... the whole situation. I mean, those are little truths. But see, and that's why I always say to people, new writers or new artists, I've been around enough stuff to where I've seen stuff happen where somebody one day is please, 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 and the next day they're multi-millionaires.
Off and running.
Off and running.
Yeah.
So, it can happen.
Yeah.
It might happen in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, you're not
What
going
did
to
you
see
plan?
it. Yeah, you just got to keep working.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Back to David Sanchez. My goodness. I had never heard of David Sanchez, and then one day I was watching some daytime TV show. I think I was maybe like with my wife, and she was watching something, and I, was just in the room, and then I saw Natalie Merchant. And I looked up, and he was playing with her. And he was so good. And I was like, who is this guy? Look at this piano player. And then they came back to Natalie Merchant later on in the show. I wonder what show this even was. But it was one of those daytime. Yeah, like what would be Ellen now.
Right. I remember those shows. Yeah.
But then they came back, and I want to say David Sanchez was her MD. And the second song they did on the show, he was playing guitar. And I thought, what does this guy do? He was a man. I didn't even know who it was. And then when they talked to her, like they did a little segment at the very end of the show where they talked to Natalie Merchant. So this is your first solo album after 10,000 Maniacs, and how's it going? And she said, it's going great. I have the great David Sanchez with me, and he's guiding me through this thing musically, and he's great. And I thought, who is this guy? Now, what I had heard was that he had created a solo album of his own, and that it was, for anybody who's heard it, supposed to be terrific, but that right when they were going to release it, Bobby Caldwell's record came out, and it took off, and they went, okay, hang on, David, and they put that one aside, and then that record ended up not ever seeing the light of day.
Wow. That happens.
Yeah.
So it's a small world.
Yeah,
small
it
musical
really
world.
is. So, with regard to, going back to your work with Kenny G, I just wanted to acknowledge my musical mentor is Rich Uggan. He's a drummer from the Bay Area. Plays with
What's his last
Whispers.
name?
Uggan.
Oh.
Aguon. A lot of people pronounce it Aguan, but that's not how we pronounce it where we're from. However, he, I remember at one point I don't know how the subject of Kenny G came up, but it was early on, and I said, yeah, Kenny G, he's not as good as David Samuel. And that was my feeling about him, and he said, no, man. You got to give Kenny G a try. And I said, why? You talking about the dude with the big curly hair? And he goes, yeah, I'm talking about the dude with the big curly hair. He played sax on some of our Collage albums. And he was in a band.
Oh, I remember Collage.
Yeah.
With Solar Records.
Right.
Larry White and them guys.
Yes. So he said, no, you got to give Kenny G a chance, because that's, he's of my musical brethren. And
Kenny, what I noticed about him, I've been, especially when we were doing a lot of work and I was traveling around, we would maybe do a project in Miami, then we'd maybe go to St. Martinique or something for a little vacation, right? So I'll never forget, I was just on the beach, just chilling, and it was real quiet. And then I heard a song coming from, it seemed like a mile away, but all I could hear was the soprano sax, because it was in a high couple notes. It was coming from a distance. I said, that's Kenny G. I never heard the song. It was probably maybe his new album. This was way after I worked with him. I was like, wow. And it hit me like, the thing about him, he may not be the best player, but he has a sound.
He definitely has his own voice.
And that's I think what how many sax players do we all know? And we might see somebody at a nightclub in a small town that, man, that guy's great. Why? Maybe it's because they don't have a sound. I mean, they may be great, but
it's not like
a lot of chops. Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the guitar. You can hear a guy play, and just his physicality, the guitar he picks and how he sets it up, he'll have a real signature sound.
That's some instruments are harder to have your own sound. Like I always say, the instruments that you are not able to blow and use your fingers are harder to. Sax you can so you can affect it with your lips and your finger.
Right.
But like piano is probably the hardest to have. So
Your
if you got a guy like Brian Culbertson, to me has a style because of the way he affects stuff, the way he leaves space. Herbie Hancock, same thing.
That's what I thought of as you said that was there was a song called, I think it was Steppin' in It, and there was everybody had a solo, and Herbie's solo was last. It was a good long 10-minute song. I think it was on Watermelon Man. So you could tell, like, okay, here comes Herbie. Oh no,
You
not his turn yet. Not his turn yet. And then wait, here he comes. Okay, and then finally you were like, well, that's everybody. Herbie must be next. And then so they did the nice lead in, and I think the way that I remember this, I haven't heard it in a long time, but I don't know why I instantly thought of this, but the way that I remember it is that Herbie, his part came, and he just went Zana. And then he made you wait for him to come back, and you were like, oh.
Space is even with vocalists, like, Frank Sinatra. He used space, and it's not so much what you put into it; it's sometimes what you leave out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is what you put there, though. Because a couple days ago, I heard "Man Eater," Daryl Hall song, for the first time again, and we realized that in the chorus, he just goes boo, and he holds that thing there indefinitely.
Oh, you're talking about the sax?
No, it's a keyboard. No,
really?
Note. Yeah, it just sits there.
Does it look string line or something?
Yeah, it's just that one note string line, and it weaves all the way through all the chords in the chorus. And the thing that made it interesting, after Pete pointed it out, we had to listen to it again. It goes through the entire chorus, but at the end of the song, they do the chorus, and then the solo break is the chorus, and then the vamp is the chorus. So that there's a dude in the last 2.5 minutes of the song, he just got his finger on it.
You would never know. But yeah, that's part of coloring or arranging, which is one of my favorite parts of making recordings, arranging. And that's a lost art too. But I think
that's where you kind of get to exercise your decisions the most. Is it not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you make decisions along the way. Let's say if you're producing an album and you get to write a lot of songs, okay, the first thing you do, besides consulting with the artist, is write. Mm-hmm. So to me, writing a song is a lot like having an empty palette, or empty, if you're thinking about painting, and you have a pencil, and there's nothing there, and then all of a sudden there's something. You make a great drawing. Wow, you created something out of nothing. The arranging part or the producing part is the paint. So while you already have the picture, but now
you got the outline.
You can use different kind of colors to affect the portrait in any kind of way. So that's one of my favorite parts, is the coloring of it. Like you're talking about the Daryl Hall thing. And I came from this guy here was my mentor, Thom Bell. Oops, sorry about that.
Thom Bell.
Yeah.
Okay, get out your notepads, everybody.
Yeah.
How did you get hooked up with Thom Bell all those years ago?
Yeah, and he's of course a Philadelphia. He was part of the Gamble Huff team, of course.
Yeah.
He was the lesser known as far as everybody heard of Kenny Gamble.
Gamble and Huff, right.
They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as producers.
Yeah.
But Tom was the third member of Mighty 3 Music, their publishing company.
Okay.
And Tom's first group that he produced was the Delphonics, and he wrote all them songs, Didn't I Blow Your Mind, La La Means I Love You. Went to the Stylistics, Bet You By Golly Wow, Break Up to Make It, all that was Tom. And the orchestrations on those songs, I mean, were nothing short of just classical genius and beauty, you know. And
says our generation's master of the lush ballad. Please continue.
Well, see, that's kind of what I can't help having that, even if it's an up-tempo thing.
It makes sense, though.
You know,
that was your,
that was my background.
You as the apple,
Yeah.
not falling far from the tree.
And I was 15, well, actually I was 10, 11, 12 when I was looking at little 45s and noticing his name on there. And
he was prolific.
Yeah, the Spinners, all that stuff.
Right.
You know, I'll be around. You know,
All that. There's so much of that stuff that now that you mention it, if we go back and listen to all those great Philadelphia sound songs, you can hear the Thom Bell song.
Yeah, he was a producer and writer, but he also arranged songs that he didn't produce, like Backstabbers. And he arranged
Backstabbers.
Yeah, I mean, you know, stuff like that.
That's such a great arrangement. And now that you mention it, just that opening, dum, 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 dum,
I know.
and then when the strings just wander in, yeah.
I mean, that's how a sound is born too, because he's writing it, arranging it, or he's not even in the room, but he's influenced it.
Yeah.
And those guys are like, this is how Tom would, you know.
Right, and he really was an influence to me. I never knew I was going to work with him, but I sort of sought him out when I was 15. I saw in Billboard magazine he was doing a seminar. I was in California. He, Philadelphia.
Where did you grow up?
I was an Army brat. So while I was born in Fort Ord, California, which is Monterey.
Salinas, around there.
Yeah. Then Dad moved, you know, all around. We settled back, though, in California. So originally New Orleans was an area we spent a lot of time in.
Okay.
But,
My favorite city.
Yeah, me too. So I sought him out. Went to a seminar he gave when I was 16. I went there, and I think I caught his attention, even though there were 200 people there. I was the person that came from furthest away, because I never forget. He was like, "How many of you?" I was a little late too, because my flight was late, so I was in the back.
You flew to this event.
Yeah, I was only 16.
Okay. You were 16 and flew to this event.
Yeah, I didn't have much money.
I'm going to take another sidebar, because I saw something you recently posted on Facebook, which was a picture of you when you were 17 years old, and you had already written like 77 songs or something. What, do you remember that? It was only from like a couple days ago.
Oh, I don't mean to... I'm just going to state facts.
Yeah.
No, I was 14 and I already written over 700 songs.
Oh, my goodness.
And not to say all those songs were good. Maybe 5 of them were good.
No, but come on, that's what it takes, right?
I started writing when I was 6. And right when...
I'm going to write this song about how much I like my mom. And then from
I
there...
didn't even...
Cookies,
That's a good... You know, I'm glad you guys are saying it, because... First song was talking. I was 6 years old. I was talking about a girl broke up with me. Now I didn't have no girl back then.
Yeah.
Girls had the cooties, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I
You
wrote from experience, I guess. And then I'll never forget. My older brother was like, "Where did you get these songs? Where'd you hear these?" I go, "What do you mean? Where did you hear them?" I didn't even know what songwriting was until he's the one that kind of said, "No, you are writing songs. You are composing." I'm like, really? What? But then I started growing up, and long story short, I remember from age 11, for about 3 or 4 years, I wrote a song a day.
Yeah.
All right.
It was like, okay, I get up,
love it.
maybe start it, go to school, come back, do my homework, and then push. But anyway, so I went out there, and he was like, "How many of you from out of town? You know, not Philly, but New York, you know, some people say."
So the event was in Philly.
Yeah, it was at a little Holiday Inn there. So, and then
did you find an ad, or how did
Billboard magazine,
Okay.
Thom Bell songwriting workshop.
Right.
Like, he's such a private person. Well, now I didn't even know. I'll tell you some funny stuff, but I didn't know. I just thought, oh, he's giving away. We must do them all the time. I got to go meet him. So I went out there, and I was just raised my hands, you know, and I've always been kind of short, so he couldn't really see me. And finally, somebody said Kansas City had come out. They were like, "Ooh, he came out from Kansas City! Wow!"
Yeah.
And he didn't. Finally, I was like, "Oh, young man in the back." I said it wasn't Los Angeles. It was Monterey area, California. I think I said. He goes, "No, not where are you from. Where did you come from today?" "California."
I'm from Fort Ord, man. I have 3 I'm serious. I had to go to Burbank, and then Dallas, and then you know what it took to get me? Yeah. So then...
and I was obviously the youngest one there. He was like, "Where are your parents, boy?" But then he kind of took... He said, "Come on up here." And then, you know, everybody's like clapping. "Come on up, come on up."
Sandbox Love. I got it.
So, yeah. See, that's what you would think. You know, the song I presented to him, I'll never forget, because It was called "Promises Were Made to Be Broken."
Mm.
And anyway, he heard. You know,
That's
that was
a lot
the
of
thing.
depth for a kid, though.
And it was a gift, but I'll never forget. He heard the song and he goes, "Man, melodies and everything are really beautiful." He said, "The lyrics are sorry."
Yes.
If you know Thom, he's his music portrays somebody that might be regal, like yes, the name. No, he's like Richard Pryor. He's just hilarious. But he said, so I went up to him. He said, "Young man, come join us for dinner. I know you came a long way from home." And so I was like honored to be sitting at the table with these. And I went over to him. I said, "I want to move to Philly and work with you. And, take up some
Says
of these
this
pointers."
kid whose parents didn't come with him from
He
California.
said, "Well, you got to finish high school, man." And I said, "I'm gonna finish high school in Philly." That's what I said.
Okay.
And so I kept bugging him like that
He
night
knew
and the
you were
next
about
day.
it, though.
And he said, "Look, I'm trying not to let the cat out of the bag, but I'm leaving Philly. That's what I'm saying. Finish
Don't
high
come
school.
here.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
come over here. I'm actually coming out your way." So I was probably one of the first to know. He said, "Nobody really knows. I'm leaving." I thought he was coming to California, but I found out it was Seattle.
Okay.
So sure enough, finished high school, bugged him to death. He heard a few songs. He said, "Okay, I'm gonna sign you and your brother Alan to a staff writing deal." And we packed up the truck and moved to Seattle.
How the heck do you focus on high school? Because I know you're writing songs, and it's got to be like you're sitting there in science class going chemistry. I don't care, but I am thinking through lyrics. I mean, you had to have been tapping your foot, writing songs the whole day.
I was doing that.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I mean, that was in my blood to where, I would perform my songs at little talent shows or the school little choir thing, whatever. And they all thought, "Oh, he wants to be a singer or something."
Yeah.
I never wanted to be an artist. And I would explain, "No, I want to just write songs." Well, for who? It was always something. I think it was my dad that pointed out to me, because he'd buy me a 45 every week or something. I'd say, get the Neil Diamond or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I would. He pointed out the one in the parentheses is the one that wrote the song. Because I would say, "Well, who's his name? Carole King?" Or because that wouldn't be the artist.
The artist, yeah.
He said that's the one that wrote the song. And I go, "Write the song." Yeah, the one that came up with, and then the singer sings it, but the person actually made it up. Oh. And I started seeing the same names of, like, Thom Bell was like, "Oh, I like that song. Oh, him again. Oh, no wonder I like that song." That's where I came. I was only like 7 years old.
Sure.
But like I said, it was a gift. And my parents around the house, my mom would play a little classical piano. She played music like Johnny Mathis and Nat King Cole. My dad was more of he played a little blues guitar.
Okay.
Played Jimmy Smith, B.B. King on the records. In fact, they would argue, "Take off that classical stuff." My mom would, "Take off that, devil music." Whatever. And, so I got the combination of both. I love funky stuff, but I love beautiful stuff too.
Yeah. Wow.
And being an Army brat, the radio stations in the different areas, sometimes it would be no soul stations, it would be all pop. Sometimes it would be, soul, depending on where we lived and what area. And I got a good cross section of that when I was growing up. And then, when I was listening to radio, I wasn't just, listening. I was like, I want to write something like that. So that helped shape, I think, my appreciation for music, I guess.
When we were driving up, we were talking, and I didn't know you had any kind of an Army connection, but I was going to ask about, if it came up, and I guess it has, the phrase, "who's zooming who?" Where does that come from? Because I'm going to tell you that for my generation, I was in the Army, you'll hear people say that, "who's zooming who?" They'll yell it at each other, like,
Really?
It'll be like a sergeant major will be like yelling at you, and,
Wow.
so it became part of, at least for that era,
Yeah.
part of the Army vernacular, and,
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'll tell you exactly where that came from. Aretha Franklin's mouth.
Okay.
Because
It's a good place.
this is a woman that, of course, we know she's one of the great. Well, Rolling Stone called her the greatest vocalist of all time. They had a list, I think, of about 100 or in one of their issues, counting down, and Aretha
was number one.
Over,
Deservedly
Sam
so.
Cooke or whoever else. And so when Narada got the call to produce her, And he had talked to her a couple times on the phone. He's like, man, the way this woman talks is so cool. The stuff she says, man, it's like, man, that sounds like a movie or something. He says, so Preston, on this call, I want you to sit there. Don't say nothing. I'm going to put her on speakerphone. And if she says something that's really kind of cool, write it down.
Yes.
So Narada calls. Hey, Reed, what's going on? What's up, my Ferrari fella?
Okay, right out of the gate.
Ferrari fella. We actually wrote a song called Ferrari Fella. Never. But anyway, so.
But that's worth writing down.
Yeah. And Narada said something like, how's your love life? You know, just messing with her a little bit. And she goes, I forget. When I go someplace, I forget I'm Reed. I forget who I am. I'm in there scoping somebody out. I was scoping. Now, scoping ended up being within the lyric of Who's Zooming Who. But anyway, she goes, and I forget, so I'm scoping. They're checking me out. It's like, who's zooming who? I wrote down who's zooming who. That's how that happened. Yeah. She said, if you look on the label, then she got writer's credit. The song was a big hit in the title of her album.
Yeah.
And you gave her a writer's credit, and I bet
she didn't even know. She didn't remember. She said, I said, okay, thank you.
Now, the way that it breaks out, that means she gets to share in another piece of the royalties.
Yeah, she got, I think she got 10% of the song, but she wasn't expecting anything.
All right.
When we turned in the credits, we put her, I think how she found out is Clive said, oh, that's a great song. I didn't know you helped write that. And Aretha said, I didn't. What are you talking about? You had your name on there.
Oh,
this is called Narada.
That's right, I did.
And Narada goes, no, we gave you, because, we were talking to you on the phone.
Yeah.
Hey, you have a picture of En Vogue up here.
Yeah. I never worked with the whole group, but Cindy Heron, one of the girls, I did some songs with her, and she sometimes does background sessions.
Fine one.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to make Maxine jealous.
Maxine sang on the Clif Payne.
I saw that.
Yeah. So
let's talk about that for just a moment. And man, you've been so generous with us, and I don't want to take up any
gonna
more
have
of
to
your
do
time
another
because we have
Sure.
been here for over an hour, and I promised we would just be an hour. But the Clif Payne album is the one that you've worked on most recently.
Yes.
And so, what else are you working on, and what would you like to say about the Clif Payne album experience?
It was a great experience because it was, to me, like reuniting with the Bay Area.
Okay.
And Clif being from there. Larry Batiste, who was a big integral part of this album, he co-wrote all the original songs with me and Clif. And Larry's an old friend of mine. Larry and Clay Toven writing team. Yeah, I've known them for years. So, and then we did it at a studio, Laughing Tiger, which is in San Rafael, with Ari Rios, who's an old friend of mine too. So,
Laughing Tiger's been there for a long time.
Yeah, and this is one of the only studios that I know that the owner built it himself with his own hands from ground up.
Wow.
It wasn't in a building that
Yeah.
he built the whole
He built
thing.
the room.
And yeah, so I saw it happen too from ground up because I used to record it in Ari's living room.
Wow.
So yeah, it was great to just be there with these folks again. And then I loved Clif's voice. We just had to figure out again what are we going to do? We were just going to do some good songs, and so we decided to try and make it count by having a couple of guests that have a little bit of a name, like we mentioned, Maxine, but also Frida Payne, who just happens to have the same last name as Clif. And then we got a little clever with it. We said, well, what song would we do for Frida? So we wrote a song called No Pain, No Gain, with spelling Payne, sure. And then did a duet there. And
but they're not related.
You're no relation. What's funny is I've been seeing little news articles and stuff. Clif with the great Frida Payne. Clif is her cousin, or one person said ex-husband. Yeah, it's like, oh man, they're really making that stuff up. Anyway, but it was a joy to work with. It's a new project. It just came out last month. We just had the release party 3 days ago.
Yeah. Pete and I showed up at that release party, and when we got there, the release party started at. They moved the start time to 8.
What time do y'all get
originally
there?
it was at 7, and then we moved to 8. Well, we were doing a podcast with a comedian named Cedric Drake. So we said, okay, great. We have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So we got there about 7:20 and walked up and said, hey, we're here for the 8 o'clock listening party. And we had Cedric with us. I texted Clif. I said, hey, you mind if I got, Pete's with me, of course, but I got a comedian that was doing podcasts with us, and he'd love to show up. You mind if I bring him? He said, no, come on, more the merrier. So we got there, and the maitre d' said, oh, that room is full. You guys are going to have to wait. And so we waited about a half hour before we went.
You had to wait outside?
Yeah.
It was that packed in there?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
It was.
Yes, it was. So I think the party was a great success.
And you probably would have... They told you 8. You had probably been there, but they told you to...
Yeah, we were working towards 7 until Cliff said, hey,
We'd had a full day anyhow, though. We had actually got Angelo Moore from Fishbone
Oh, wow.
earlier that
Fishbone.
day, too. Yeah.
Just chasing him around is a full day.
Yeah. He's still doing it, huh?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes, he is. Anyway, so, but I will say finally, man, you've been so generous with us.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you all. Pleasure meeting you. And look, if you want to,
Yes.
pick my brain for more stuff.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes, we would. Here we are, Preston Glass. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.